Welcome to Inside Politics, the weekly podcast of how San Antonio politics really works. I'm Greg Jefferson, Metro editor of the San Antonio Express News and a columnist. I'm joined today by City Hall reporter Megan Rodriguez and our special guests, Chad Carey, owner of the Empty Stomach Group, which has several dozen properties. 14, including Little Death, Barbaro. You don't actually include Paper Tiger.
We include Paper Tiger. That's amongst the count.
Okay. All right. And we can go into several of your other properties. We also have Jody Bailey Newman, co-owner of the Friendly Spot on South Alamo. We asked you in today to talk about the Business Community PAC. It's a new political organization or political action committee that is really kind of representing restaurant owners. And I get the feeling there's a lot of anger behind it in the way the city of San Antonio has handled street projects and kind of maybe without having restaurant and other small business owners top of mind. So let's start with how the PAC came together. Jody? Either one of you. Jody, sounds like you're the one. Jump in.
Well, I just think it came out of concern for the local independent small business culture in San Antonio. I volunteered and mentored for over 10 years at the city's Launch SA, which is the small business accelerator. Chad's been over there a lot. We started seeing businesses have to not only survive starting a new business, but then start surviving their surroundings. Public works projects, infrastructure improvements, maybe bond projects, and then just other things. So we came together to start talking about that.
And give me an example from your own experience of maybe a project on South Alamo that impacted or hurts the Friendly Spot.
Yeah, I think over the years, we've seen a decrease in consideration for the local independent small businesses. I feel like we used to be part of the conversation on timing, timelines, more information, and certainly then going through the pandemic and seeing the responses to that, seeing friends of ours for a decade lose their businesses, have to declare personal bankruptcy, that then just put us in a place where we started talking about, is the environment here in San Antonio local, independent, small business friendly? How do we?
So
how
for
do
you,
we,
it was a matter of
that?
So the city would get in touch with you and say, "Hey, we're thinking about here's the schedule we have for this project X. What do you think?" I mean, did it? Was that the gist of it? And you're saying that's what changed over time. They just stopped asking.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I think basic what we started saying was we deserve some consideration in the process of this wonderful improvement that's about to happen in our city or on our street, or these major projects that are happening that we're so psyched about because we're promoting this city every day in our small businesses.
I was going to say, that joke about, how someone went into bankruptcy slowly and then all at once. Right. The diminishment of the quality at development services and public works at One Stop collectively has been something that's been really frustrating to watch, but it kind of happened. It happened slowly. And those frustrations sort of get to the point and they then all of a sudden you look up one day and you're like, oh my God, it's just a disaster down there to try to get anything done as a private business concern. You said, did it come from anger? I think initially it came from this incredulity. Surely this cannot be how we are operating as a city. And especially if you are, Jody and I have some war wounds, but new people, new entrepreneurs are like, what in the world? And we would get those calls like, is this really how it goes down here?
Yeah.
Right. So would this PAC have come together if it hadn't been for kind of the effective shutdown of St. Mary's Strip?
I would like to think that I would have been selfless enough to say, yeah, I want to help, but probably not. I mean, at least to the extent that I've been involved in it. But it did. I think that once we saw that St. Mary's was the first but not the last, and frankly that the management or mismanagement of that project was an indication of a much larger problem in the city, I think that is where everybody said, hey man, it might be North St. Mary's one day, but it's about to be South Alamo, and it's about to be New Braunfels, and it's and on it's going to go.
Can you describe for us what happened
on the Strip?
Yeah, on the Strip.
Well,
and including the kind of the time frame.
Well, yeah. What was interesting is there were some meetings that we had with Public Works on the planned scope of the projects. I think that was in 2018 or 2019, and then it kind of went dark for a little bit. And then they started the project coming out of the pandemic, which again, one of those things is like, I mean, the project was designed and funded, and you're like, man, they had like a whole year where the Strip was literally shut down, where they could have done this project. They were not able to do that. What the city will tell you is that as a function of the sorry contractor Spoglass that they had hired on that project, what they will tell you is that there were two things that really screwed it up. The first was unknowable subsurface conditions. Sound familiar from South Alamo, which, by the way, is sort of like, listen, if you've ever developed real estate, if you've ever developed a project, in a previous life, I was part of the group that developed 1800 Broadway, a big multifamily project at Broadway and Grayson in the same general area. When you're designing a project like this, there should be no major surprises like this. They're like, oh, there's really, crappy silty soils underneath. There's crappy silty soils everywhere down there. This is not an unknown thing. So part of that is like, well, if they didn't know, it's kind of a lame excuse. They should have known. They're in the business of knowing. You don't design these projects and then you stick a backhoe in the ground and hope for the best, right? The second thing is that Spoglass had to fire a subcontractor who incorrectly installed a lot of the upfront wastewater sewer infrastructure in there, which again is sort of like it would be if you were sitting down at Barbaro, right, at your table, and your order had gotten screwed up, and you didn't have your food, and then finally, an hour later, a burnt pizza shows up on your table, and you come and flag me down and say, "Hey, Chad, this pizza is awful, man." And I said, "Yeah, man, boy, those guys down in the kitchen, they really are screwing it up." Anyway, we'll talk to you later. I mean, it's like ultimately, this general contractor is supposed to oversee these guys and to manage them. So once those two things, and those were the identifiable things that Public Works would kind of cop to, and that Spoglass would cop to. But from that point forward, once the project kind of got sideways, there was such a bizarre lack of urgency to get it back up right. There was no one at the city demanding that the contractor do X, Y, Z, that you attempt to, okay, we've screwed it up now. Let's really focus on it and let's push it forward. And the city wanted to do everything except actually create urgency towards the contractor to get it moving. But that's the shortest way I can summarize it.
Right. And then just for listeners to know kind of the dates, exactly, because like you were saying, this is coming out of the pandemic. So March 2021 is really when the upgrades got started on everything. And then it was originally projected to be October 2022 that it was going to be wrapped up. But it really wasn't pretty drivable until last summer, and then it wasn't like fully celebrated as completed until this April. So.
Yeah. We sort of felt like it was mostly reopened about this time, so late September of 2023. And yeah, it devolved to such a degree where you just got the idea that no one cared. And what's funny is on the first half of this, of the St. Mary's debacle, I think that the business owner community over there had taken, and I was at the time the president of the Business Owners Association. I'm like, listen, guys, I've worked in construction. It is complex stuff. Building roads is tough, blah, blah, blah. Let's try to be positively spirited. Let's try to do what we can. And it wasn't until Aaron Pena and I really just started going sort of wild on social media that it got paid attention to. And it's frustrating because you're sort of like, why do I have to act like this to get them to pay attention? But the sad truth is we were sitting there trying to be a collaborative partner with Public Works, and that didn't get anything done. If anything, it made it worse.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm kind of curious about First of all, the effect, I mean, you less so now, but I mean, during that period, you were all over social media.
Yes.
A lot of cleverly worded rants, but they were rants against the city.
I might have been working glue, Greg. Yeah.
Right. How effective was that? I mean, did the city respond to that approach at all?
No, they never responded, but we heard behind the scenes they were deeply unpleased with our posture. Well, I think it was they were embarrassed, and you know, there's a writer who I like that has a great line that says, you know, ridicule is the inescapable fate of the ridiculous. And when we started, our strategy was to kind of ridicule them, to show them like, man, you guys suck at your jobs. And it's and then kind of trying to weave that in with the fact that it was hurting actual people, you know? But yeah, that was how it started.
Yeah. Maybe it didn't go so well, and now you're co-organizing a new political action committee. Is that an outgrowth of that frustration?
I think
the fact that you know, social media, you know, kind of shaming the city on social media didn't work particularly well. Maybe your own outreach to the city maybe didn't work particularly well. So this is it.
Well, I think well, I don't know that it didn't work well. It certainly got their attention.
Yeah, I actually think that sometimes when you say this is actually hurting someone and this is hurting a person who is a constituent and a taxpayer that's creating jobs, generating sales tax, and you're speaking to the person who it is their job to ensure that that person that's losing everything slowly, that doesn't happen. Right. And so I think, I'm not sure it was shaming. I think it was truth telling on a larger scale. We have friends who took out second mortgages on their homes to get through that. They're now currently struggling trying to pay that debt back. That is real. So if it hurts someone's feelings or embarrasses someone to say it out loud, then I mean, I think the local independent small business culture in this city is worth it. And so if we have to say it, we're going to say it. The other point I would make is that Chad, Aaron, all the businesses on St. Mary's, they were the sexy spot to do the report on.
Yeah.
There were blocks all over San Antonio and have been for the past 5 years that are experiencing the same thing, that can't get a lick of coverage, that are having the same exact fixable issues.
Yes.
So what do we do when we get the phone call from them?
Yeah. That's an important point. I think, you know, most people under the age of 35 have been to a show at Paper Tiger, right? Or they've been to one of Aaron's bars and danced the night away. So we were a very public facing sort of group of people. Like everybody knows the Strip in general, right? If you grew up in San Antonio, it's been what it is for half a century, or didn't, right? But yeah, North New Braunfels. Who can talk about the businesses over on North New Braunfels? And that is where it's like if it's kicking us like this, imagine what they're going through.
Yeah. So Jody, how did the pack come together? Like what's the story?
Well, I think overall we would get these phone calls. I would try to usher them to launch SA. If they were in different areas, we would try to do outreach. But that's a lot of work. We have jobs, by the way. We have businesses. Right. We employ dozens of people. So it became almost burdensome to try to get action on it. And I think we just kept back thinking to ourselves, we're looking for consideration and to be a part of the conversation and for our feedback to be legitimized. We don't simply have time to make this stuff up. This is a real world situation that's happening. I'm going to give you the address. This is happening. This is this person's livelihood. It's everything to them.
And we were fighting those on kind of an ad hoc basis. You know, it's like the emergency here, stick our finger in the dam. And then there's also, like Jody said, we're all busy with our stuff and we want to help someone, but we don't have a ton of time to do it. So I think the idea became, and it was just a series of phone calls, text messages, and chats in person of like, let's get something that's a little more holistic and a little more organized, and we can kind of, share that burden across of good advocacy for small business.
How much have you raised?
I don't have a clue.
Yeah, we don't know.
Okay.
I mean, I think we're.
Yeah. Do you have a goal?
I'm not sure we do.
You know what's funny is that at that meeting at our kickoff rally last week, there was a lot of like, what's your goal? And these are people that do this a lot.
Yeah.
And I think we're just looking around like, I don't know. I don't think we're trying to raise a bunch of money so we can leverage it into a bunch of spends. I think what we're looking to do is to something that feels, because it is, a little bit more grassroots and a little bit more real. I think we'll be able to get as much money as we need to do the things that we need to do.
So I guess the idea is to run on issues in next May's city elections, not to back any particular.
Yes.
What does that mean, though?
Advocacy over politics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we are here to ask the questions out loud, like we did about, hey, this barricade has gone up. Why did it do that? And you're sitting there and 3 o'clock, you call them back and they don't know why the barricade is there. And you're like, really? It's been there for 8 hours. Why is the street being closed? Just, can you tell me that? And I think, so we're going to ask those questions on a larger scale, certainly to the people who are going to be elected to lead this city, right? They're responsible. So what are they going to do about the horrific situation that local independent small business owners are afraid for improvement projects in front of their businesses? Instead of being excited,
it's crazy.
They're like, we're afraid.
Here's what I mean by advocacy over politics. Advocacy is, okay, if One Stop vis-a-vis Public Works or development services and any of the subgroups within those things, if they're screwing up, right, who's accountable for that? Well, that's the city manager, right? Well, what happens when the city manager is not doing their job? Who is supposed to make that person accountable? Those are our elected officials. Yeah. We've got a mayor and 10 city council people that need to do a lot better job of saying, like what Jody was describing, when these things are screwed up, when there's this culture of saying no to everything, right? How do we fix that? It has to start with the city manager and the city manager's office. And if they are incapable or unwilling to do that, that's when I expect the elected officials that sit on that dais to say, guys, what's going on? We cannot work this business like this.
So do y'all have anybody who's running for mayor or any of the city council positions? I know the races are a little bit far ahead, but a lot of people have started announcing. I guess, are there any folks who y'all are kind of leaning towards supporting?
No.
And I don't think that is not going to be our focus, is to say, because you guys know when they're running, they'll say whatever they want to say to get elected.
Right. Well, I mean, so you're not going to back individual candidates, but have there been any city, because at this point we have about half a dozen announced mayoral candidates who are kind of serious, right? Have any of them said anything to you that you would read as, hey, this is good? I mean, they're talking about some kind of practical solution to our problem.
I don't think we've asked enough of the questions to be able to know the answers yet. I certainly think that we even joked, like we were talking about organizing in something and we're like, well, we'll just do it after the summer. And then we all sort of laughed like, wait a minute, there's already all these candidates all this stuff. I mean, I think
they got away from you. Yeah.
Well, I think it's traditionally doesn't start this early. Yeah. And so what we're going to do is over the next, several months, we're going to be asking the question, how do you intend to make this better? How will you hold city management accountable? I mean, we're a strong manager system, right? That's the system we're in. But I know, like every day when I drive to Holy Cross on the west side, General McMullen, Culebra, it gives me energy to see all the small businesses and all the families whose lives have changed because of those small business, because it happened to me. My husband and I were 9-to-5ers. A job loss, we opened the Friendly Spot, and now I'm sitting here in a fancy podcast room, and the Express News wants to know my opinion, right?
It's pretty nice.
No, that's what I'm saying. I feel like this changes people's lives, and someone has to be out there saying, hey, this matters. And I know I would go to Chad and I would be like, I think this is it, and I think I was the polite one. And Chad would look at me and say, Jody, like your heart is in the right place, but sometimes they're wasting your time. And we really took that to heart. And I think this is why we're going to be asking those questions.
Being more polite than me is an exceptionally low bar that Jody has set for herself.
Don't use profanity. That's about it.
Here's what I'm encouraged by at this point, at the individual politician or mayoral hopeful level, however you want to say it, is we are on people's radar. We had 3 sitting council people at our kickoff meeting that was, a fairly small thing. I know that a number of mayoral candidates are discussing, at least in a big picture sense, the bond project stuff. So the very fact that it's at least part of the conversation right now is making us hopeful. I think that we are all very leery of being of using the advocacy part of our mission, of that being sort of aligned with political agendas and things like that. I think that we want to leave ourselves. We want to always be focused on advocacy. And I think we want to eschew politics to the degree that it is a suck away from everything else, if that makes sense.
Right. Now, you'd mentioned holding or being unable to hold the city manager, Eric Walsh, accountable, right? Because this is, this city administration, that's him.
Yes.
You're talking about going to his boss, city council and the mayor, and exerting pressure there. But I mean, you do have a city charter election coming up with Prop C, which will remove restrictions on the city manager's pay and tenure. Has there been any consideration or any talk of campaigning on Prop C?
No.
Okay. So you're not touching the city charter.
I don't know that we will touch the city charter. We may weigh in on certain aspects of it, but here's the reality. The charter amendments that are proposed right now don't have anything to do with holding the city manager accountable for his job. These charter amendments could pass or not pass,
right.
And it doesn't impair our council's ability to look across the dice and say, my man, what is going on? You know what I mean? I think us staying focused on that is really important for our group.
So you wouldn't be concerned either way if the vote goes to where they're able to limit or no longer have a cap on how long the city manager would be in office, you wouldn't have any kind of concern over that.
I mean, truthfully, I believe somebody can work for me as long as they are doing a good job per their supervisors, right? I mean, so we can talk all day about parameters, but the question is like, where's the annual review and what does it say? Do you, Board of Directors of San Antonio, i.e. City Council, do you believe that this is good for us? If they can come to us and answer those questions, then maybe I look at a 2012 bond project that's going on a quarter mile from my business in 2024. I mean, I think we're at this place where we want acknowledgement of some of these things. We're going to bury again a 100-year-old water line. Right. There's been very little coverage on that and very little outrage, but who's asking the question? My hope would be that the supervisors are asking the question, how did we get to this? And then maybe see where they did wrong and correct on future projects.
Yeah, Megan, it may sound like we're trying to be squirrely and not like to commit to one way or the other about the charter amendments. I think that at this point, we don't necessarily conflate all the charter amendment stuff with the primary focus of our advocacy, which is accountability for the city. That can happen in either scenario. And I just don't know that I've spent enough time thinking about what one has to do with the other. They don't really have much to do with one another, in my opinion.
Yeah. Just a quick question about the name, business community. I kind of took that as we always talk about the business community. And by that, I think we usually mean the large employers in town, USAA, HEB, Valero, things like that.
The monogrammed on their sleeve.
Yeah, right.
Crowd.
Yeah, exactly. Was by calling it the business community PAC, were you kind of playing with that idea and turning it on its head? I mean, that's kind of how I took it.
Because in San Antonio, local independent small business is the largest employer.
Yeah.
We are the business community in San Antonio. So we're asking for that consideration.
Yeah, the small business is, why does it have to be a small business? You know what I mean? Collectively, there is a lot of power and a lot of energy with our group. And again, I think that we also, even though, Jody, me, Aaron, even though we come from hospitality backgrounds in our businesses, we do not want this to be a hospitality-centric organization necessarily. Like Jody said earlier, I think we have the benefit of, no one might know what so-and-so, insurance company is, right? Or some, electrical company that is impacted by this stuff. But everybody knows about the places because they see them, they go to them, they spend their money there, they have dinner there, whatever the case may be. So I think it's us trying to keep the focus of it broad enough.
We have been contacted by small professional services. We have been contacted by retail. We have been contacted by so many different small businesses in San Antonio affected by these issues. Right. So hospitality is just sort of, I think, sometimes the sexy thing to talk about.
Yeah. Now, is there any more to the PAC's agenda other than, hey, city, handle street projects better in a more business-friendly way? Is there more to it than that?
I think so.
Like what?
We are definitely surveying people as they contact us. They reach out to talk about their issues. I think certainly development services and all of the interactions that local independent small businesses have to have through that department to do business in the city. I think we're learning about new stuff every day. So I think you will see our questions broaden when we start to put them out.
There was already conversation about the TOD zoning overlay.
Correct.
And some of the aspects that would potentially affect small businesses as part of this overlay district. I mean, you can say it's just about holding the city manager's office accountable for development services and public works. But that is vast in terms of the way that touches small business owners. If you want to, pull a trade permit to do a small remodel of your office, right? If you want to change the base zoning district because the neighborhood folks have gotten into your kitchen about a certain sort of thing. If you have issues with Metro Health, getting way outside of their skis and, kind of harassing you as a business owner. I think that what I would like to see, it's such a vast ocean of regulatory and bureaucratic things that you have to deal with at our level that, to me, changing the culture of development services and public works to be much less adversarial and much more helpful to small business owners, that means there's a whole lot of scenarios that can play into. But yeah, ultimately, I think it could extend to anything that a regulatory arm can touch. And there is just this, inexorable movement towards adding restrictions on making everything that it takes to do business in this city more burdensome. All of those things. And it's hilarious because this ends up sounding very much like a conventional conservative chamber of commerce sort of talking point.
Yeah.
But when you have to live it day to day, you're just sort of like, oh, okay, well, this is not fun now that they're doing it to me,
I know that y'all talked about not wanting to necessarily get behind certain candidates as a PAC, but some of the business owners kind of involved have a history of kind of rallying behind now District 1 Councilwoman Sook Kaur when she was running. There was a lot of, I think, frustration toward former Councilman Mario Bravo, who had been kind of in that role when St. Mary's Strip was under construction. And so I guess I just wanted to hear, how have y'all felt about Councilwoman course so far?
You mean like, would we give her a report card?
I mean, yeah, I guess. What are your thoughts? Yeah.
I mean, as a citizen who lives in San Antonio in District 1, yes, I would vote for Sook again. I think that my guess is that the totality of the amount of crap at One Stop right now has probably been surprising to her. I think it's not betraying any particular confidence for any council person to say a lot of them come in and they're like, oh my God, because we ask them for help. We'll direct people to, constituent services within their departments. And then they find out very quickly what it's like to deal with One Stop the same way we do. They're like, you got to be kidding me, right? And again, part of this about our group is there are things that, well, I don't know if we should say them, but I'm certainly willing to say them publicly. There's a bunch of people, both on the political side, the elected official side, but also on the sort of like more conventional, bigger business side. They can't send out a mean tweet about Eric or Ron because they need to walk back into that office to get their next project approved or, whatever it takes. We don't feel like we have to walk that line so much. We can call a spade a spade. But getting back to your question about Sook, I think that she has certainly been accessible, right? She returns emails, she's returned calls, as does her staff. I think that she has not shown herself to be beholden to either quote side of a particular issue. And I have very much appreciated that. Plus she's shown a lot of energy. I mean, these guys have such a hard job. I mean, it is, although, Diego Bernal told me one time, he's like, because I've said that before, and he's like, dude, you need to stop saying that because they ran for this office. Don't apologize for this. They got the job they wanted, But I think that I'm very sympathetic to the amount of things, the amount of problems that they are asked to help facilitate and solve. But I'm excited about what Sook has done. And, the interesting thing too is like, with Jalen or Terry, or there's a lot of people that you might not agree with every aspect of what they're doing politically, which is why we've, at this group's level, we've tried to stay outside of the specific politics of it. But, I really appreciate how they're accessible and they're responsive and they are thoughtful about the actions they undertake when we hit them up for something.
I guess, how does that compare to former Councilman Mario Bravo? Because like I said, I know there was a lot of frustration there, but
I think it was hard to be anything in the aftermath of the pandemic. I'm sure the balls that were in the air double or tripled. I will say my experience with Sook's office has been really great. I feel like the staff is so responsive.
For sure.
And I think that is not always the case. I've been down on doing business on South Alamo for 15 years, So I've seen lots of different folks. I think when we opened Friendly Spot, Mary Alice Cisneros signed our variance or whatever,
It's a deep cut.
Right. So I think, so I think, is she doing a good job? But yeah, I think she is.
And the comparison to Bravo, the problem with Mario, well, first of all, his behavior on the dais, which got him removed from committee, you can't have a representation when the guy literally can't serve on any subcommittees. So like there's that, which was highly problematic. And then I think that, man, you want to put the, like, bless his heart on it. He tried sort of on the fiasco on the North St. Mary Strip, but frankly just didn't have the horsepower to get anything really done. My problems with Councilman Bravo had very little to do with how the Strip fiasco went down. He didn't make it worse. He didn't make it better. He was just kind of there. The issue with Bravo had everything to do with the Tobin Hill Neighborhood Association, and that was a different sort of thing. And I'll tell you, to the extent that we wade into politics, I feel like we want council people who are not simply going to react in a reflexive manner against every single complaint they get from a neighborhood association, from any sort of political action committee. I think we want people that are going to take their job seriously to figure out the way to make the business of the city run better, if that kind of makes sense. Yeah.
So we've got at least one city council, mayoral candidate, Rolando Pablos, talking about not just, doing capital projects in a way that don't hurt businesses, but also talking about things like tax credits and grants to restaurant owners for hiring. And he's talking about transportation and childcare subsidies. What do you think of that? Is that a role that city government should play, giving money to restaurants?
I think it's a national conversation, right?
It is.
So
this is not.
There's that.
It's true. That's not unique to Rolando Pablos. It seems to be bubbling up.
Yeah, and I think on the state level, it's a state level conversation that's happening. I think I'm always a little, weary or suspect of someone who says they're gonna, I'm gonna save bars and restaurants. So my response to them is always, hey, let us save ourselves.
That's right.
Let us sink or swim. We know how to do it. Give us an environment that's friendly to local independent small business, and we can do the rest. You can't grant any business out of chaos in front of their business for 2 years, blocking their parking, blocking their driveways, blocking the ability for them to dump their dumpsters, right? I mean, these are things that are happening on the regular. Mm-hmm. They can't get any traction. So they're sometimes getting cited from the city for not doing things they're supposed to do. You can't grant someone's way out of that. Mm-hmm. But you know what you can do? You can go into public works. And you can go into oversight. You can be doing annual reviews. You can, and when you're on council, that's your job. Like when you're on council, don't save bars and restaurants. Right. Maybe make sure the environment that I'm running mine in is the best it can be. Because if it can be the best it can be, then I can worry about doing what I do. Chad can worry about doing what he does.
Guys, any entrepreneur, any small business owner is an entrepreneur at heart. And entrepreneurs, I think, bristle at the notion that we're sitting outside the Greyhound station, with our guitar cases open, asking for stuff. Right. We just want you to get out of our way. That is primarily what we want. We want to remove all roadblocks so that entrepreneurs can do what they want to do, which is run our business. We've joked about that, this political action committee is going to take some time. It's an important investment for us. But every hour that Jody and I are spending on stuff like this is an hour we're not spending making our businesses work better for our employees, for our customers. I don't know. I personally really don't like this idea of like, we need this, we need that. When we started lobbying on the Strip, for example, for some form of restitution via the city for screwing this project up so bad. It wasn't trying to beg our way back into solvency, like Jody was saying. It's like we have been damaged financially. Like in any economic sense where you're damaged financially, you should seek damages from the responsible party. It wasn't that, we need money because life is hard. We've been through the pandemic. We've been through the year after the pandemic, which was this bizarro version of what happened during the pandemic. We've been on a wild ride, but when you feel like on top of that, you're getting layers and layers of additional roadblocks. That's where it brings up the sort of the response from us. Say, just get the hell out of our way. At the same time, it's when I read that he has a platform, he said 10 things or something. Is that 10 or 11, something like that? I scanned it briefly on my phone. I mean, some of the stuff is like, oh, okay, I'm not sure that is the role of the city, right? I mean, you could also make an argument that pre-K for SA is not the role of the city, and that's been a remarkable program that's had great results. And it wouldn't have happened without Mayor Castro, and his leadership. But I think that show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome. If you believe that independently owned, locally focused businesses are important to the fabric and the culture of a city, then you should incent that. When back before it looks way too easy now, but back in 2010 or 2011, before all of the dense multifamily development started happening kind of in and around the Pearl, some in Southtown, all of these projects were slated and none of them, including the ones at the Pearl, could get financed. The city came up with a program, and a lot of the same people that still work in the city manager's office were instrumental in that program. And lo and behold, the city provided the incentives, and the outcome is pretty demonstrable today. And that has all of these spillover benefits. I don't think that I'm personally uncomfortable saying, shovel a bunch more benefits to small businesses. because, you know, echoing Diego Bernal, no one asked us to start these businesses. No one compelled us to do it. You know what I mean? We're the ones that brought these into the universe. Yeah. But I think that, and it's part of the reason that I think our advocacy has thus far kind of resonated. It's because people love the neighborhood bar, right? Imagine King William and Lavaca without the Friendly Spot. Like it doesn't even make sense to think about it, right? I think people love those sort of places, and I think it's certainly, there's an argument for the city incentivizing more of that.
Right. Kind of in a related vein, we've talked a lot about what the city's done wrong with its street projects. They have tried to make it right to a degree. I mean, they did create a grant fund for small businesses hurt by, if they can show that they had a revenue loss because of street projects.
So I would ask for you to look up the scorecard on that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
See how it works.
Well, you tell us about it.
Well, and also, I'll tell you what they didn't do. They didn't ask any of us about how to build the program.
True.
And by the time whatever trickle of funds were distributed to the people that actually qualified them based on their goofy math, it was over a year after. I mean, it was just, again, it was handled with the same sort of bungling, unfocused hilarity that the bond projects themselves were funded by.
Yeah. Now, I think what may be behind this conversation, talk about, incentives and subsidies for restaurant owners, is the fact that the industry is in kind of sorry shape right now.
Yes.
Texas Comptroller's Office says that, restaurant revenue this year is significantly off where it was a year ago. First of all, why is that? I mean, we seem to be in a period where inflation is lower, the economy is still relatively strong, and tell me if I'm wrong, it seems like the job market is a little friendlier to employers now, is it not?
Maybe a touch.
Red Lobster just closed a shit ton of their locations, right? Yeah. I think it's one of those things where it does come down to the operator. Mm-hmm. I mean, I know for us at Friendly Spot, my husband loves the term co-owner. Because really, it's like one owner, and that's the Newmans, and we live down the street, And so we're able to maybe make decisions that somebody who has lots of investors and a significant, debt load, trying to do that, we're maybe able to take less to make things happen.
Yep.
And that, again, I think echoes why local independent small business is so important. You spend money at the Friendly Spot, it's staying in the neighborhood, right? We care about the schools there. Those are our neighbors, like all the things.
The Friendly Spot's actually sponsoring my competitive eating team. That's not true.
And have been for years.
It just looks true when you look at my body.
And have been for years, actually.
Speaking from my group, because, we run a pretty bizarre, diaspora of places with, wine bars, restaurants, live music clubs, nightclubs. We kind of hit a bunch of different parts of the market. Mm-hmm. Two things, sticker shock and vibes, right? We've all heard of the vibe session. The sticker shock is that, listen, if two people went to go eat at Barbaro 2 years ago, depending on what if you ate like a normal person, which I don't, but if you went and ate there, your check is going to say, $70, right? At the end of it. That same check now probably says $90 to $95. And our margins are thinner than they need to be, frankly, right now, because we're worried about raising prices. Everybody feels this. At a purely anecdotal basis, you can ask anybody, how much does it cost to go eat? Whether it's a burger at Five Guys or a sit-down meal at Barbaro, it feels too expensive. So yeah, you can look at the macro data and say, oh, but incomes are up and all of this sort of stuff. Well, yeah, but it doesn't feel good. And then the vibes just feel off. My theory is that the passage of time will just normalize the fact that, you're not going to go sit down at a restaurant and get a $12 hamburger anymore. That's just that those days are over permanently. And that if you want to go have a certain sort of experience, right, within the restaurant world, you're just going to have to pay more. At our bars, what's been the interesting manifestation of that, because we haven't really moved prices a ton for the primarily alcoholic beverages that we serve. But what we're seeing, the bars get busy later. You know, put yourself in the spot of being a 25-year-old, right? You're maybe not making a lot of money. You still want to go out and dance and have fun on Friday or Saturday night, but maybe you wait to go out until 11 if you used to go out at 10. Right. Because the same thing happens. If you used to close your tab at the end of the night and it said, you know, $25, it probably says $40 now. And I think that behavior.
So young people are going out later.
They're going out later.
I think so.
I feel bad for young people.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So I think that
to save money.
I think at least the people that I talk to in the industry, and again, regardless of if it's a high-end fine dining, if it's, you know, everyday stuff, if it's food trucks, if it's bars, everybody's revenues are much softer, and we're still seeing creeping costs because, like you said, it's maybe not as bad as it was 2 years ago, but it's still challenging to find good people. Wages are up, which is a good thing overall, but it does create operating pressure. You know, part of the reason that Five Guys burger costs $13 now is because you can't pay people $10 an hour anymore to cook that food. So I think it's a bunch of different things. And again, you know, part of the reason that we're so resolute about committing time and energy to this particular effort is when all these other challenges are kind of adding up to a lot. Our food and drink costs more to buy at a wholesale level. Our labor costs more. Our operating costs cost more. Our insurance costs more. And then you add on top of that this just oozing primordial bureaucracy who is unhelpful at every turn, and in some cases really proactively awful. You're like, okay, we got to get rid of that part of it. It's hard enough for us to do what we're doing on the business side. We can't have the city be adversarial to us. They need to be helpful.
I would say that when you're looking at people who are seeking elected office, over my decade of being, you know, in this, I know Chad could say it too, they reach out to us.
Yep.
They want affiliation or discussions or this kind of thing. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with using that to try to improve things for the very people they're going to come to in a couple of years and ask to be a part of social media or whatever it may be. I think we're lucky in San Antonio to have the local independent small business culture that we have. It's very welcoming, and it's only gotten more welcoming. There are things like Launch SA, which I think are good things that the city does to put that out there. I sit on the board and try to affect change from the inside out, you know, in organizing how to speak and get with people who are like us. You and I were coming up on the elevator and we were sort of talking about the struggle. San Antonio, for some reason, is stuck in a 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. It's very tough for people who are running our city to acknowledge people have second shift, third shift jobs. Yeah. Another change about people coming out later, I'm noticing, is a lot more families out later. It's been since the pandemic, and I think it's a great thing because I used to be the one riding the bikes with my kids when I got home at midnight, right? And so I'm seeing more and more of that. San Antonio is going from a small town to a major metropolitan city. And I think and we're experiencing a lot of those growing pains over the past couple of years, and I'm sure the next few years will continue, where things just look differently. They just do. And I would say that my books, the numbers, later numbers are significantly stronger than they used to be. And so as an operator, what do? We look at that and we pivot. We look at that and we pivot. Our business runs at the speed of light, which also sometimes is hard for bureaucracy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. All right. So you've got the pack up and running. You will know it was successful if in 2 years, what?
Yeah, man, and it's a great question.
It is,
because so much of it was a while ago now, and it was before the pandemic and before things got as bad as they are. But there was an event, and I saw Ron and I had a personal exchange, and he goes, "What can I do to help your business
Ron, you
run
mean
better.
the mayor.
Yeah, the mayor of San Antonio, Ron Neer, but not for much longer.
Just make sure.
I did everything but grab him by the shoulders and shake him. And I was like, you have got to fix One Stop. And okay, so that's great. Fix One Stop. What the hell does that mean? To me, it is a difficult thing to describe, but it is again, it's a cultural mindset shift for everybody that works with there. And listen, there are, I feel like part of this is like there's people I know that do a good job that work hard down there that, you know, once things really went sideways on the Strip, John Paterick in the city manager's office was really wonderful. He was out in front of things. He was super responsive in sort of helping facilitate a bunch of different minor stuff, you know, with the contractor on the Strip. So there are good people like that.
Yeah.
But man, when you go into One Stop, you just sort of feel this. You're going to sit there. You're going to take a number. You're going to wait for 1 to 2 hours. You're probably going to get pushed to 3 different desks, and no one there wants to help you. They all just want to get you from out in front of their kiosk into someone else's, and then you're in the whirlpool of like, oh my God, what am I supposed to do? And half the time you leave just like, oh my God. There was a particular time where I went to transfer a C of O on a property into our new entity's name. And the person at the kiosk said, you can't do it. I mean, I literally went kind of, you know, full Karen / Chad. And I'm like, yes, you can do this. You are supposed to do this. This is your job. And we left with this person saying, I'm not going to do it. And I told her, this is unacceptable. You really ought to be ashamed of your attitude here, right? The full tantrum, right? Really embarrassing in retrospect, probably. I left. I get an email the next morning at 9:30 with the thing that I asked for to be done, without any further action on my part. So which was the correct course of action, by the way. But it's sort of like, why did I have to go through that? Why did you have to go through that?
Why did you have to be Karen?
Correct. And God, I know.
Well, you have to think this was an interaction prior to the pandemic, right? So I mean, I think to categorize how we feel as like our experience over a decade and a half of things that we've seen change or whatever. I don't think it's pinpointing one thing, but rather just creating a foundation for all local independent small business owners. And in two years, maybe if it's still around, that's success.
What I want is not measurable. What I want is for when people come in, and I'm especially attuned to this. Listen, I've been working at One Stop in some form or fashion through my real estate career and then through my hospitality career. Been working there since 2001, before One Stop even existed, right? And so I know enough to sort of like, if nothing else, bully my way through to getting the outcome that I need. I think more and more about a first-time entrepreneur, someone who is new to it, who's very green, doesn't know what they're doing. I think about people that might not have English as their first language, right? I think about there's all of these outcomes you can draw. Like if it's this hard for me and Jody and for Aaron, imagine what it's like for other people who don't have our experience and our history and our resources and our connections. Sure. So I just have this fantasy, and it may stay as a fantasy, where if somebody walks in to One Stop and they've got an issue that they need to get sorted. By the way, these issues tend to be things where they've got cited for a thing, or a city inspector has told them no for whatever reason. I want somebody in that city to say, hey man, let's get this fixed for you. Right? Our job as the city is to get to the point where we're saying yes, and let me help you get there. Not to just know and point you in a different direction. And hopefully the only way you survive this is just not stopping and not giving up. I think that cultural and attitudinal change will be what I recognize as success.
Okay. Now, Jody Newman, your friendly spot opens in 5 minutes. Chad Carey, you have to get Hot Joy reopened.
Yes, I do.
So why don't you both stop luxuriating in our plush studio, get to work. Thank you very much. I really appreciate you taking the time. We appreciate it, and thank you for joining us. By the way, if you've not signed up for the ENside Politics newsletter, go down to the show notes. It'll tell you how to get there and sign up. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next week.